Hi everyone, welcome to day 3 of Play NYC 2020. We're kicking things off with you today with something really special. It just so happens that one of our graffiti game developers, Andrew Augustin, is a former student of legendary game designer Warren Spector. Both join us now for a special conversation. Take a look.
And we'll cut out the beginning, so it's not a big deal. So yeah, ready, 3, 2, 1, action.
Hey guys, my name is Andrew Augustin, and I'm here with Warren Spector. Let me set that up. I'm sorry. Okay. Um, hey guys, welcome to Play NYC. My name is Andrew Augustin, and I have the honor of being able to talk to the legendary game designer Warren Spector. How you doing, Warren?
I'm doing great, Andrew. Long time no talk.
Yeah,
Just for
been a
people who
bit.
don't know who I am, I'm Warren Spector, and I've been making games for an absolutely horrifying 37 years. Worked on a bunch of games and had the honor of being one of Andrew's teachers a little while back at the University of Texas. So this will be an interesting conversation.
Oh yeah, it's been a while. It's great to be able to talk to you again, Warren. It's been amazing being one of your students at the University of Texas for the Denius-Sams Gaming Academy. It was a great experience, but before we get to there, I want to have everybody know more about you and your career. So could you give us a brief overview of your career?
Yeah, I don't know how brief I can do it, but I actually started as just an everyday game nerd back in the 70s. I started playing D&D in 1978, I guess. So not in that first wave of players, but in kind of a second wave. And I played in a group where Bruce Sterling, the science fiction writer and one of the fathers of cyberpunk, was my dungeon master, and there were a
Oh,
bunch of other
really?
writers involved. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I played in that group for about 10 years and had a great time. If I start talking about the way it ended, I'll probably start crying. But
Mhm.
so we'll move past that. Um, and I was also playing board games, stuff from Avalon Hill, and mostly actually from metagaming designed by a guy named Steve Jackson. Um,
Oh yeah, Steve Jackson is a pretty see, I've heard of Steve Jackson. I'm just not too familiar with him, but the name definitely rings a bell.
yeah, well, he's an Austin, Texas game designer, and for some reason, he took this amateur game designer and game player and gave me a job. I was his editor in chief on his games at Steve Jackson Games. So I did
Oh,
that for a
okay.
few years. I guess the thing I'm best known for at Steve Jackson Games was a game called Toon, which was a cartoon role playing game. And that
Like role playing, like a traditional kind of RPG kind of game,
Yeah,
or
you get your group together and you roll a bunch of funny dice and you tell stories together, which was kind of a seminal experience for me actually playing D&D and Toon and Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest and other
oh, so
games
was
like
it like
that.
a board game in a way?
Well, it's a tabletop game
Okay.
where you tell stories together. There's no real board unless you want to play on a grid of some kind and move miniatures around. That wasn't what we did. We used our imaginations mostly. But the interesting thing is, I'll get back to my career in a minute. But all that D&D experience um, really set me on the course I've been on ever since. Because in electronic games and digital games, all I've ever wanted to do was recreate that feeling I had telling stories with my friends, where it wasn't,
Mhm.
being told a story, it was telling a story together. And that's a really powerful thing when everybody can become a creator of content. I hate to say that content, but everybody can be a storyteller. That's really powerful. And I've tried to capture that in my work. So from there, I told you I couldn't do this briefly. From
No, it's
from
fine.
there,
I'm all ears.
I went to TSR, the folks who made Dungeons and Dragons. Worked there for a few years and worked on some D&D stuff and Top Secret and a bunch of board games. But there came a day where this is literally true. I looked down at my hands and I had percentile dice in one hand and six-sided dice in the other, trying to decide which one to use in a new game system. And I just looked at my hands and said, if that's the biggest decision I have to make in my life, I need to find a new way to make a living. And so at the time I was playing, computer games all over the place, Ultimate Games and Might and Magic and a bunch of other stuff. And out of the blue, I got a phone call from Origin Systems, where Richard Garriott was making the Ultimate Games, which were spectacular games. And he offered me a job as an associate producer.
Around what time frame was this? Like, what year?
Oh yeah, I started in '78. In playing in '83, I got my job at Steve Jackson Games. In '86, I went to TSR. In '89, I went to Origin, and that was, talk about a special place. I mean, I don't know if anybody else felt this, but I spent 6 or 7 years at Origin and got to make some games that I'm really proud of, working with the guys at Looking Glass on Underworld and System Shock. I got to work on Ultima 6 with Richard and Wing Commander with Chris Roberts.
Those are all like big names.
Yeah, it was like going to graduate
Shock.
school, for game design.
Yeah.
And I really felt, all the time I was at Origin, I felt like we were going to change the world. I really did. It's, egomaniacal, I know, but the amazing thing is...
in a way, you guys did, though.
Yeah,
at least the gaming world. Yeah, because I mean, the projects you guys worked on, I wasn't even like a computer, PC gamer or anything. I was more Sega Genesis and everything, and I've definitely heard of all the projects you were working on. So it clearly had a huge impact, and the projects you were able to, touch on was obviously big enough for even people who never even played the games to consistently hear about it.
Yeah, they were some pretty big deal games. I was kind of the B game developer there. Richard and Chris had the huge budgets and big teams and everything, and I had my little teams and made my low cost games, and I loved that because nobody cared what I was doing. Nobody paid any attention because everybody was paying attention to Richard and Chris. So I got to play around and do all sorts of crazy things, first person perspective, fully textured 3D games. No one had ever done that before. We shipped Underworld before Castle Wolfenstein came out. Damn it. So we were first with that. Okay. So, I worked there. EA bought Origin. I worked for EA for a few years, and then spent a little while working for Looking Glass, which was just one of the best experiences of my life. And then,
how long were you there for?
Well, I worked with Looking Glass as an external group. When I was at Origin and EA, I was the guy who produced and managed the Looking Glass titles.
Okay.
So
it seemed like you kind of had pretty good, you moved up seemingly pretty fast. Like, touching on a whole bunch of great things. Like,
I was in the right place at the right time, and
was this
had some skills, I guess. I don't know.
Can you guys pause 1 second, because this fan is on and it keeps making my eyes water. So can I? I'm gonna turn it off real quick. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay, hopefully you guys can edit that part out at least. All right, I'm back. I'm sorry.
Here, I'll move so you can see Showdown.
Oh, okay.
The one of the great villains of all time from System Shock.
And did you? What was your hand in that?
Well, my role on the games from Looking Glass, the Underworlds and System Shock, was to handle process stuff. I had to make sure that the games actually came out at all, ever.
Okay.
But I've always played this weird mixed role. I tell people don't do as I did, do as I say, because it's really hard wearing both a production hat and a game direction creative hat. But
Okay.
that's what I've always done. So
So what does that
on
mean
those
for
games,
for the layman's, like
I
in
always
layman's
had
terms?
plenty of creative input, and on the narrative and on the gameplay, and I would talk to the teams every single day and make sure that they were making the game that we wanted to make. And so I've always had this mixed role on every project I've done because I can't give up control. I'm a kind of a control freak.
Yeah,
So
and that's completely understandable. So I mean, so you, so what did you like doing more, like producing or designing?
early on, it's always been a little of both. I mean,
Okay.
on Ultima 6, the first game I worked on with Richard Garriott, I spent weeks at his house eating too much Chinese food and working on the design of Ultima 6. On Underworld and System Shock, like I said, I talked to the teams every day. Especially one guy in particular is one of my best professional buddies and personal friends, a guy named Doug Church, who's an unsung hero in the world of game design and game development. I've spent most of my career trying to make him famous, and he won't let me. So
Oh,
at
really?
least I can get his name out now. Doug Church. I
So what
talk to
is the
him
difference?
daily.
What's the difference between producing and designing?
Well,
So like, what is the roles?
production is ownership of schedule, budget, process. And the way I always put it is I was the guy both on that side, the process side, and on the creative side. I was the guy who had one more vote than everybody else combined.
Okay.
So if I didn't want something in the game, or if I didn't
It was
think that
done.
the game was going the way I wanted it to, it was gone. It was out of there.
That must have felt powerful.
It did, and it still does, to be honest. But the thing you have to remember, and this is something we talked about at the Denius-Sams Gaming Academy when you were in there.
Hmm.
If you ever have to use that vote, it's a problem of leadership. It's my problem.
Hmm.
It's not the team's problem if I have to overrule them on anything. So I've been pretty successful at communicating what I want. That word is very important. Want. Somebody has to want something in the game, and then it's the team's job to either talk you out of it, make it better, or make it happen.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of the split. I could say, "Here's what I want," and the teams would say, "Okay," or "Hey, that's really stupid, Warren. How about this?" Which happened all the time. Um, I after Looking Glass, I went to Ion Storm. Uh, John
And
Romero.
around what year was that? When
That
was Iron Storm?
was 1996,
So you
97, somewhere in there.
so how long were you at Origin and then
I was
Looking
at
Glass?
Origin for about 6 or 7 years, and then at
Okay.
Looking Glass as an employee. I'd worked with them as an external developer, but as an employee, it was just about 2 years.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, that was an interesting time. I've never been assigned a project except once at Looking Glass. I was assigned the job of making Bob Costas baseball, and like, why? I know nothing about baseball.
I'm going to look. What is it called?
Bob
Bob?
Costas baseball. Bob Costas, the sportscaster,
Okay,
and I got to
okay.
meet him, and he was great, But I don't know why they asked me to do that. Anyway, I went to Ion Storm, and to make a long story short, I made a game there called Deus Ex. John
Oh,
Romero.
just a game called Deus Ex.
Yeah,
It was a
well,
huge game. Huge.
well,
Would you say that's one of your highlights of your
oh
career?
yeah,
Is creating
yeah,
Deus Ex?
um, yeah. If you ask me what I'm most proud of, I'll never say what my favorite games are that I've worked on because they're all like my babies.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I think I'm most proud of Deus Ex and Disney Epic Mickey.
Oh,
And
Epic Mickey.
yeah, the reason for that is it's kind of interesting. You know what I do. I don't know about anybody else, but early on, you know, when you have a concept in your head and an idea, you know, you kind of close your eyes and imagine what the game is going to be
Hmm.
when it's done, and it almost never ends up looking like you imagined. Um, but
I
with Deus Ex,
I
I
can
closed
attest to
my
that.
eyes, and you know, like years later, I opened my eyes, and every detail had changed because the team was so good. I mean, Chris Norton and Harvey Smith and Jay Lee and the rest of the team, they were just so good. They made everything I wanted to do better.
Hmm.
Everything. So every detail had changed. But in terms of the way the game felt and the way it played and what it was trying to accomplish, it was exactly the game I imagined, which never happened. The same thing with Epic Mickey. You know, the team just made that game so much better than I dreamed it would be, but it was the game I wanted it to be from the start. So those
So
are the two
how did
games
it
I'm most proud of.
feel to like be able to, you know, release projects on such a big, you know, wide audience, especially working on Disney properties like Mickey? Like, how did it feel to be able to be the guy, you know, leading the team to work on these kind of projects?
Well, you know, it's interesting. You say a wide audience, but that isn't really the case. I mean, I'm kind of the king of the cult classics, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so for until I got to Mickey, my game sold pretty well. I mean, you know, a million, 2 million copies isn't anything to sneeze at, but
No,
you know,
absolutely not.
I've never worked on a you know a 20 million unit seller or 100 million unit seller,
I
but
mean, well, I mean, okay, when Deus Ex came out, was that the late 90s?
2000, June of 2000.
2000? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 million copies is still a ridiculous amount of copies sold. Like,
Yeah,
I would say
it's
that's pretty mainstream right there. I
um
mean, in the
maybe.
franchise still going to this day.
Yeah,
I mean, they
it
released
freaks me
on,
out. It freaks
yeah.
me out because we're 20 years later and people still play the game and still talk about it.
Oh, I've seen an
Uh,
article about it. Actually, I think I may have linked it to you. Maybe I think if I remember correctly, or I may have posted it on Facebook or something. But yeah, people still talk about Deus Ex to this day and how it was like a masterful example of great design in games. And I
well,
think I'm sorry.
yeah, you know,
I
it
mean, it
it
is. I mean, people say it, and it definitely. And so I guess what kind of design elements were in Deus Ex? What elements would you explain for people who may not be familiar with Deus Ex? Like, what could you do in that game? What was so great
well,
about the design?
as much as possible, you could do whatever you wanted. Um,
Okay.
that was kind of the power of the game, and my idea was to to give people the same kind of narrative authority, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
that they had in a D&D game. In a D&D game, you can do whatever you want, and the poor dungeon master has to just accommodate that. You know, if a group says I don't want to fight today, sorry, it doesn't matter how much the dungeon master prepared for a big fight.
Mm-hmm.
There's no fight, right? Because the players
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do it. And the same thing in Deus Ex. I wanted players to be able to decide I don't want to fight. You know, I want to sneak around. I want to play in a way where I'm never seen by anybody. I want to solve problems the way I want to solve them. Maybe that's fighting. Maybe that's not. Maybe that's talking to somebody. But in Deus Ex, the whole idea was there's always another way to solve problems. We didn't create puzzles where you have to read the mind of the designer and solve the puzzle. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't play, I mean, we didn't make a game where you you had to show your skill necessarily at a particular thing. There are plenty of games where you know you have to kill everything that moves.
Mm-hmm.
And in Deus Ex, you didn't have to kill a thing. You could kill everything that moves. There were always multiple routes to get to your goal. What we did was we told players what to do. You're going to get in that room, past that door. But we didn't care how you got past the door. And
you gave players a bunch of different options and ways they can go about every situation in the game.
exactly. We gave them a variety of choices. We showed them the consequences of those choices. And then the game had to deal with those consequences. The players had to deal with those consequences. And then the thing that a lot of people miss is they think that Deus Ex and other games that followed that, maybe we're influenced by it, I don't know, but they think they're games of choice and consequence, but there's a third part. There's recovery as well. Choice, consequence, and recovery. So if you make a choice that you don't like and the consequences are too dramatic or not what you want to deal with, we always gave you a chance to recover from that and find another way to keep going, right? So,
Could you give an example? Because
well,
that's a pretty interesting idea.
If you, okay, if you, your brother is being held hostage in a room by terrorists, okay, and you can get in that room by picking the lock. You can go through one of our ubiquitous vents. There were lots of vents in Deus Ex to get in the room without anybody knowing it. You could blast the door off its hinges, but then the terrorists would know you were there. Okay. So let's say you didn't think it through and you blasted the door off its hinges, and all of a sudden you were in a fight. Well, we let you, run away far enough, and the terrorists say, "Hey, we got to go back and guard our hostage." So you were able to recover from that, through the air quotes, from that mistake, right? In Deus Ex Invisible War, the sequel, we went even further with that, and you could side with different factions. And if you decided, "Hey, I just sided with the wrong faction. I don't like these guys after all," you could change and support another faction. So you could always, make up for mistakes, I guess. But the real power is, let me back up a step. In terms of that philosophy, choice, consequence, and recovery, I wrote up a manifesto, and the original version was 12 pages, and no one would read it. Game developers don't like reading, I've discovered. So I did an 8-page version. No one read it. A 4-page version, a 2-page from 1 page, and a 1 paragraph. And finally,
wow,
I just said, here's the underlying philosophy of all of the games that I've worked on and all of the games that I will ever work on. It's 2 words. Play style matters. Okay? Play style matters. And that encompasses a lot of big ideas where players get to decide how to play. It's not for me to tell them how to play and how to solve puzzles. It's for them to decide how they want to play, and the game is smart enough to accommodate that. So that's the simplest version of, if I can say it, of a game design philosophy that I've followed. I learned that from Richard Garriott. The Ultima Games did an early version of that. I learned it from guys like Paul Neurath and Doug Church at Looking Glass, where we took that to a new level.
Were you ever a fan of like Metal Gear or like Resident Evil? Only because it kind of gives me like, everything you're explaining kind of gives me, because when I was growing up, those are the kind of games I played at the time, because I had a PlayStation. Those are the games that I was able to play that kind of had that open exploration kind of element to it. It's probably more linear than what you're explaining, to an extent.
There you go.
Yeah, it's more linear than what you're explaining, but it has the illusion, I guess, of, I guess it's more like yours sounds way more open, and but I was just wondering, like, you did name your inspirations, but I was wondering if those games at all had any kind of impact on your design philosophy?
Yes and no. I mean, I always say things that I regret later. So here we go. I'm not a huge fan of those games
Okay.
because they are linear and because you used a really important word, illusion. They give you the illusion that what you're doing has impact, but in a sense, they're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
To an
There's another
extent, they all
game.
kind of play out similarly, like every play
Yeah.
group, to some
Yeah.
extent. Yeah.
There you go. That's exactly right. So what I strive to do is ensure that when they get done with the game, no two players have had the same experience.
Okay.
If two players say the same things, then I feel like I've failed. I want players saying, you know, I told that story. It's not completely open, and it's not. The deal for me is that games are they're kind of a dialogue between the developer and the player.
Mhm.
We each have our responsibility and our role to play. What I do is work with my teams to craft a completely linear story. I own Aristotle. Okay,
Mhm.
3 acts. Rising tension, diminishing tension, denouement, all that stuff. I own that. I tell the overarching story, but the players own the minute to minute. And that's a very D&D thing to do. A dungeon
So
master,
how do you balance out something like that? Like how do you,
it's
as a
it's
designer,
just
like
like a dungeon master. It's just and the players in a gaming group. The
okay.
dungeon master creates the skeleton of a story. Here's what the players are going to do tonight, and the
Mm-hmm.
players decide the minute to minute. So I own the overarching story as a dungeon master in D&D or as the developer of the game, and the
Mm-hmm.
players own the minute to minute. It's like uh, imagine. I don't know if you've ever listened to people describe their D&D adventures, but it's all here's the description of a D&D adventure. I did this and then I did that and then I did this and this happened and I did this and this and this and this happened and then that
Mm-hmm.
happened and this, and it's the most boring story in the world. Well, I mean, to the person telling it, it's like Moby Dick, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
because they did it. But what the dungeon master and what I try to do with my teams is to give significance to that, okay? To give context and significance.
So
And
when you
that's
say
what
give
stories
significance, what do
do.
you mean by that?
Well, okay. Um, it's if you break a game down, I'm going to oversimplify dramatically.
Okay.
If you break a game down, um, let's take that same scenario I gave you before. It's a locked door, um, terrorist holding my brother hostage. If you
Mm-hmm.
break that down into what's really happening, it's I put a white pixel on a brown pixel and pressed the A button, and I got a red pixel. That's what it is. But
Mm-hmm.
if you say that's my brother, and I'm putting my sights on a terrorist, and I'm pulling the trigger, and a blood spurt happens. I mean, it's a terrible story, and I hate the fact that I had to use a violent example. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. But anyway, it's that's that's way cooler, you know.
Yeah.
So, and that's a little story. So, um, that's what I mean by context and significance. You're rescuing your brother is a tiny little part of a story, and it's not. But the player decides how to solve that problem. How do I save the player? How do I save my brother? I don't
Okay.
know if that described it, but that's
I
kind of
mean,
what I look
it
for.
is definitely a very, very like me as a designer. I think it boggles my mind how you even put this kind of stuff together. How you
Boggles
even
my
like
mind too. Are you kidding
prepare
me?
to even think about all the different scenarios. One, you're given scenarios, but then you're also given like sandboxes for each scenario. And it's just like
You, Yeah, you did it
insane.
again. Great word, sandbox. Okay, and it's interesting because I'm also not a huge fan of open world games, which are the ultimate sandboxes, because
Okay.
I don't think they constrain players enough with great stories. Okay,
Have you
so
played The
what
Witcher?
I I'm playing it right now. I just started it. I'm way behind, and I've certainly
What are you thinking
heard.
about so far?
Well, everybody tells me, Warren, you got to play The Witcher. You got to play the Witcher game. So I'm a little too early to say.
Okay, okay.
So I don't want to go there just yet. I'll get
So
back in
from your
touch with you off
opinion,
camera, when I've played more, and we'll talk about it.
from your opinion, from anything you may have played, experienced, or even heard, what do you think? What games do you think come close to your level of game design, sandbox, philosophy and
Well,
experience?
um, there is the key thing for me is I make a string of little sandboxes. Okay,
Hmm.
so there's a story element, and you have goals to achieve. I'm sitting here doing this with my hands that you can't see. Anyway, little little boxes of sandboxes. So there are multiple sandboxes, and the that's in contrast to the big wide open worlds of the open world games. So
Hmm.
there haven't been a lot of games, but I'm probably going back further than a lot of people at this conference want to go. But some of the early Far Cry games did something similar. Knights of the Old Republic, some of the BioWare games did something
Oh yeah,
similar.
BioWare was really like at one point they had a really big, you know, that was like their niche, like creating like narrative experiences
Yeah,
where
yeah, for sure.
they gave players choice. I definitely was a fan of that kind of stuff, like for
Yeah.
sure. So
No, me too.
would you say like by uh Mass Effect? Would you kind of say that that was kind of
Um, I think I think Mass Effect's a little more shooty.
a little more shooting?
Yeah,
Because I remember,
but no, let me not say that. Let me not. That's unfair. Yes, the Mass Effect games are very much in the tradition that I like to work in. That and the Fable back in the day.
mhm,
Um, but you asked me earlier, about games I'm proud of and the ones that really make a difference to me.
mhm.
And all those games that came after, I I flatter myself a little bit in thinking that Deus Ex and the Thief games as well um, had some influence. That they maybe changed things a little bit.
Wait, you
The
worked on
games that
Thief
came
as well?
after. Well, sort of, kind of. I worked on the first Thief game. It was a 3-year development cycle, and I was there for the middle year. So I get way too much credit for the Thief games, but
Still, I'm
I
still
did I
like
did work on the
the
third
amount
one. The
of things
third
you
one came
worked
from my
on,
studio.
the amount of things you worked. And Thief is still a IP going on today as well. Like the
Yeah,
amount of things you worked on is pretty mind-boggling. I'm not even gonna lie. Like I was your student and I've looked you up and read about you and everything, and still things that are surprising me that that I'm hearing that you worked on. So that's pretty crazy. But like, let me. I guess okay. So, are you able to talk about anything that you're working on now? Are you still actively developing, or are you taking a
yeah,
hiatus?
yeah. There was a point I went to work. I created a studio called Junction Point after Ion Storm, and because I wanted to work on smaller games. Ha ha ha. That didn't quite work out
Mm-hmm.
because we got acquired by Disney, and I got to work on Disney Epic Mickey and Disney Epic Mickey: The Power of Two. Again, games I'm really super proud of, even if core gamers didn't quite get them. Um, but in any event, Disney decided to get out of internal development and publishing, and so they shut Junction Point down. And I was devastated. I mean, I spent 9 months sitting on a couch with a remote control, changing channels.
No, really.
Yeah, Junction Point meant a lot to me, and working at Disney and with Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and all that. It was like a dream come true. So I decided I needed a break, and that's why I created the Denius-Sams Gaming Academy,
Mm-hmm.
of which you were a part. But between you and me, and I guess the rest of the world now, um, about midway through my 3-year commitment to the DSGA, I started getting this itch. I said,
Want to get back in the game?
I still have things I want to make. And so I went after I spent the 3 years I told them I would spend at UT. I joined Paul Neurath, the guy I'd worked with back in the 80s, in creating a studio called Other Side Entertainment. And I worked for a while on System Shock 3, a third game in the System Shock series, obviously. But then interesting stuff happened. I can't talk too much about it, but Tencent came along and wanted to take the System Shock franchise forward. And so right now, we're working with them to kind of figure out what the next steps are for System Shock. And in the meantime, I'm doing two things. One is there's another project being done at Other Side that I can't talk about, but I will say I'm a creative advisor on that and helping them make sure that game comes out the way we want it to, and that it's great. But at the same time, I'm getting to work on new IP. I'm creating some new stuff that I also can't talk about. But you've done it. You created the Ubi series, right? Which we should talk about too. But I'm just going to create stuff. Empty hard drive, blank screen. Writing documents, creating worlds.
Is it a challenge? Is developing games like a challenge for you, or is it one of those things that you've done it so long that it's kind of becoming like, I know for myself, developing or creating in general is always a challenge, no matter how easy it may look to other people. It's always a huge challenge for me every time I go to the table.
Easy, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
I've talked to and worked with a bunch of movie guys. And I always tell them, what you do is easy. Come on. What you do, a frame every 30 hours. We do every 60, 60 frames a second. Come on. What you do is easy.
I'm sure you get people upset with that one.
Yeah, I like getting people mad.
Have you worked in film? Because I know you did stuff with DuckTales, if I'm correct, right?
Well, I wrote DuckTales comics for a while. Which was a ton of fun.
That's huge, and that was, that was left out. Like, so when were you doing that?
When was that? 2011, 2012, something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was. I love the Ducks, Scrooge and Donald and the nephews, and I love DuckTales. I want to do more of that stuff. I've got an idea for an Epic Donald game. 2 of them, actually. I could do a series, but that's not going to happen, But yeah, I've had the chance to work with a bunch of film guys who, want to get into games. The only one that's public is I was working with John Woo, film director John Woo, on a modern day ninja game.
Really?
We had a movie deal and a game deal, and the movie company it didn't go out of business, but the division that I was working with got shut down, and then the game deal went away, and it was a mess.
Oh man!
But making games is stupid hard. I mean,
there
comes a point in every project. There comes a point where I just beat my head on my desk and go, "Why do I always do things the hard way?" It's like I should do something easy once in a while, but that's not in the cards. You got to do it the hard way. If you know how to do it, it's not worth doing.
Do you ever plan on going back to teaching, or what do you feel like? Do you feel like you will ever be done creating games?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know that I'll get back to teaching. I thought that was going to be the next phase of my career, but again, I kind of found it a little frustrating. I hope that didn't come across when I was teaching, but
no, I mean, it was a great experience for me. Like, I've learned so many, not only like about the process, because I'm more on the independent solo developer side of things.
Yeah.
Though I did work on the Sims for about a year, I wasn't really, too accustomed to working with big teams and projects, bigger than, one or two people. So I learned so much about the process, like a thorough, look into, not only running a team from an art director or creative director standpoint, but like also being on the ground floor doing concept art and like just being a part of the process of a team and taking it outside of what I'm used to doing. Because being a solo developer, I don't have to create game design documents. I don't have to create a bunch of concept art for people to look at and approve. And it's just whatever I want to do, I'm doing it. And it's like I can touch on concept one day, I can touch on code the next, I can jump to anything I want. So it was cool to really see how a game comes together, you know, with more than heck 10 people, like just a bunch of creatives coming together to make one project and see that project through with and everybody jumping on board and understanding the vision and making it happen. So it was a really great learning experience. Plus you taught me a lot of terminology that I had no idea of, like waterfall and scrum and all these different terms and stuff. Like I was like, I had no idea what that was. I was just going in and making games. So I mean, it
Yeah.
was a great experience, and you know, it if I happen to be, you did two classes, like two, or was it
Oh
three?
yeah,
You said 3 years. What
years.
was
There
it?
was a year of setup and hiring staff and finding students, and then 2 years of actual classes and teaching.
Well, if you happen to not go back, I'm very glad and honored that I was able to be a part of your, the part of your career where you were teaching, because it definitely, influenced me and helped me way more than you would probably realize. So I know I've always been, basically like, I've always been telling people like, how, because people ask like, man, how you get where you're at and things like that. And I'm like, honestly, it's the people that believed in me, and I always say Warren, he didn't just reach down and lift me up. He like strapped a rocket launcher on my back and just like shot me into the stratosphere. Like it's crazy. Like I would never, people don't understand. And just going to the program, meeting you, meeting Josh and just everybody there. It was a great experience. And I really wish, other people can experience it. Like if you guys can kind of create something that can continue, even if you're not necessarily hands on. But I think it was a great thing that I haven't seen or experienced and heard anybody else kind of experience. Because the traditional, from what I'm used to, people talking about the traditional way of like, oh, I'm going to Full Sail to learn how to do concept art, how to draw and how to mess around with art. But I haven't heard anybody actually like, I think my eyes keep watering because I think I'm irritated or something. But I haven't heard anybody actually like say they were being taught how to be creative directors, taught how to be art directors, taught how to be a part of a team and, do all these different things in game development. So, I think you were on to something there. So,
Yeah, well, that was the idea, right? I mean,
yeah.
I figured when I was putting the program together that if we taught people the skills of leadership and what it meant to be an art director or a creative director, they would be better, staff members, right? They
Mhm.
would understand what those people in positions of authority were doing and why they were doing it. So they would be better able to just be individual contributors, but also it would set them on a path to becoming those people because they already had some skills and some knowledge. So that was the whole point. I'm glad you got that because that was the whole
Oh
point of
yeah,
the program,
yeah, yeah.
But
It's
let
definitely
me
on
ask
point.
you a question.
Yes,
So
sir.
you, I know there was at least a while where you literally were working alone. I mean, like by yourself. Is that still the case? You
Yeah.
you don't have anybody else working for
I
you?
mean, I have my guy who does music with me. So his name is also Andrew. So we just kind of, Because I'm kind of like you, Warren. I'm kind of a control freak when it comes to my projects and stuff like that. It's like if I can control as much of it as I can. I've done projects where I've teamed up with other people, and it's been a fun experience. Collaborating and coming up with new ideas. But I do also have a side of me that wants to just create what I want to create. If that makes sense. So if it means me doing animation and programming and designing and all that, I mean, I've kind of put myself through the trenches long enough to kind of be able to do it. So yeah, I'm still kind of doing it. But like my thing is, my composer, he goes by that Andy guy, very talented. Like I feel like he is like, if I were able to make music, it would be exactly what he's making. Because I feel like the music he creates
Awesome.
goes so well with like my vision. It's amazing. So it's like between us two, I feel like we can kind of just knock out the kind of projects that we like to do.
And
So
if I could do that, I would like kill to be able to do that. I need a team. Like I said, I need a buddy uh,
mhm,
who can I can bounce ideas off of, and who has like skills. I'm not a systems designer, right? And
mhm.
um, I'm not even much of a detail guy. I'm kind of a high level guy.
Well, I
Um,
mean, that's the thing. Like, I wasn't really that either until I stopped working on the Sims, and it was just the rebel in me. You actually want to know what my real thoughts were. My real thoughts, honestly, were this game's gonna come out and make millions of dollars, and I'm going to, I'm working, been busting my
see where this is
behind.
going.
I've been busting my behind, and I don't see anything outside of my salary at the time. And I get it; they're taking all the risks and all that, and they're putting it out in marketing. If the game fails, I still got my money. But if it is a huge success, I don't really get to share in that success. So that was one of the reasons because I want to one day not have to work if I chose not to. Like I want to be able to retire. I want to be able to make sure my kids are set up for their future and things like that. So I figured if I was going to create and bust my behind creating, why not try to create my own intellectual property and hopefully see if something amazing comes from it. So I mean, it's been pretty cool. It's been a tough road. I'm not gonna lie, but
Oh
it's
yeah,
also been fun.
startups are tough.
Yeah,
You know?
it's not for the weak-minded for sure
No,
because
when
like
I started Junction Point, man, there was a period where I was paying everybody's salary.
oh
It's
really.
yeah, and I had a team. I had a team, believe me. So that was not good. Um, be be really careful, anybody out there in the audience, if you want to do a startup. You have great creative control, and it's awesome, but
But
it's risky and hard work, man.
so like that's one of the reasons why I chose to wear all the hats because it was like when I first started doing the independent route, I was trying to team up with indie programmers and stuff like that, and you know when you don't have the funds to keep somebody motivated like in working with you, like it's a disaster. Like they'll be excited, like, and then we start working, and then like after a few weeks, maybe if you're lucky a few months, you know their work ethic declines,
Mm,
drastically. But it makes sense. They have to eat. They have to,
yeah.
it because it's like a passion project. But it really made me just say, you know what, screw this. I'm gonna try to figure out how to learn coding some way, somehow. That way I
Yeah.
don't have to. I'm trying to eliminate as many, obstacles as possible. So, but it's been
Yeah,
great.
well, I'm a I'm a little different. I'm a little different. I've actually, I've been very lucky and reasonably successful, and I don't want to complain, and I'm not going to complain. It's been
Mm.
a great 37 years, um, but I've actually never done it for the money. I've always done it
Okay.
because there's a game I have to make, and
Hmm.
I've been lucky. Like I said earlier, I've only been assigned a project once. I've always made the games I want to make the way I want to make them, and they've all kind of been passion projects. If they're not, you know, I don't know. I don't know that you can do great work if you're not passionate about it. And
Yeah,
like there was
yeah.
one time, let me tell you one story.
Hmm.
Um, at Origin, after EA bought us, I was running what they called a producer group, which was a little business entity within the company. And what I did was I would start multiple projects, two internal and two external, and then I would kill projects that weren't going well. You know, if you're not doing a good job, you don't survive.
Hmm.
So there was one time, a guy, his name is Tony Zurovec, and he's still making games today. He came he came to me one day and he said, "I got a game I want to make,"
Hmm.
and he described it to me, and he spent hours talking to me about this game, and I just looked at him and I said to myself, "This guy burns to make this game. If I don't let him make this game, he's going to quit and do it somewhere else. Somehow he's going to make this game." And that kind of passion is where real success comes from.
Hmm.
And so I got him a team and I said, "Go do this." And I didn't get the game, I didn't understand it, but he sure did. And it's kind of an old game now that most people haven't heard of, but it was a game called Crusader No Remorse, which did
Oh, I
very,
played
very
that game.
well.
Was it that red character? He kind of like
Yeah, yeah.
and
Hey, you
it was
remembered.
a yeah, it was on PlayStation. It probably came out on PC. It looked like a PC game that came to
Yeah, it was.
PlayStation.
It was.
Okay, but yeah, I used to love that game. It was like really challenging and like violent, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
well, yeah, it was, but
But I
um
liked it. That was
yeah.
a cool game. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but that was because Tony got it and loved it and had to make it.
And
So
you,
that's what I've always
in
tried to
some
do.
way, were a part of that. See, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. It's
yeah.
crazy. It's
So
crazy.
hey, I gotta tell you, there's gonna come a point in a minute where I'm probably gonna drop out because my batteries are dead in here.
Okay. Okay.
So I don't know how we want to deal with that. But if I drop out, it's not an editorial comment. It's hardware.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
So it
keep
was
keep
like that.
going, keep going.
Okay. Okay. They put a comment. It was like we could actually wrap up soon. So okay. Since that is the case, is there anything you would like to say regarding just wrapping up like your 37 years? Like what? Like if you were to kind of talk to aspiring designers, what kind of advice would you give them? And do you think I guess on top of that, do you think like um the time you got in the industry is completely different? Like how are things different? Like
Oh, everything's different. Everything's changed. Um, if someone asked me, I to wrap this up in a nice little package, I would. People ask me all the time, "What's the best thing about the game business today, the game medium?" And I always tell them the best thing is that you know everything's happening. Everything is happening. If you have an idea for a game, just like you, Andrew, you can make that game. There are engines that will let you make that game, even if your skills aren't great at programming. You can get that game to an audience. You know, you can go from idea to implementation to audience. That was not true when I started. Okay, and
Mhm.
that's only been the last few years that is true. So find something you're passionate about and make games. If you want to get into the game business and you have something to say, make sure you're passionate about it because it's grindingly hard work and it will kill you or keep you
That's what
young.
that's what a
You
lot of
know,
people don't ever realize is
right, right.
very hard. But
But
yeah,
just
that
just
passion will
do it
bring you
because you
through.
can
Yeah.
do it now. That's what I'd say to somebody who wants to break in.
Well, that sounds great. Terrific. I mean, and since we are wrapping this up, I did want to just say thank you again for everything you have done for me and my career. Like I said, it was years ago, but it's still the effects of what you have done for me are still, heck, I'm probably here right now talking to you because of stuff from years ago that you allowed me to be able to do, So I want to appreciate you, excuse me, I want to thank you for that. And I also appreciate you taking the time to even come talk to me. It's an honor.
Thanks. It was fun, and you earned everything you got, by the way, not just in the
Oh, thank you.
DSGA, but in
Thank
your
you.
career. So go. New Ubi games. Got to have new Ubi games.
Oh yeah, I got to. Oh, I meant to have Warren. I guess a side note. I was meaning to buy the Epic Mickey games and have you sign them, but I never actually got around to doing that at the academy. So I'm gonna have to bug you about that one day.
We live in the same town. We'll continue this conversation offline.
Okay.
All right. Thanks a
All
lot.
right. Well, thank you. Thank you guys. So do we just exit out or?
No, this is good. Yeah, we'll cut off the end. So when you said thank you, we're gonna cut that off. But yeah,
Okay.
all good. I got the recording
right.
and everything. So thanks everyone. I listened in to the whole thing, so it sounded great.
Oh, okay.
And
Thank you. This is
I'll
my
let you
first
know
time
when
kind of interviewing anybody. But I'm glad
no,
it was
it
with Warren.
sounded yeah, it was a great conversation.
Okay. Okay.
All
Oh,
right,
it's better.
cool.
Just
Thanks
that. Just
everyone.
okay. Thank you. All right, Warren. Talk to you later, man. Thank you guys.
Bye.
All right. Bye bye.